What do you want your little one to be most proud of?
That's a tough one. Let's say,
So I'm here with Sasha, a longtime friend, CTO of Thrive Market. Sasha, how you doing today?
good, Brian. It's great to see you again. Great to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Yeah, the pleasure is all mine, my friend. And just so everybody has a general context of who you are, where you came from, what was life like as 10-year-old Sasha?
Taking me back quite far now. So as a kid, I grew up all over the world. My mom was a diplomat. She worked for the Indian government, so we traveled a whole bunch of different countries when I was a kid. So 10 years old would have put me, I think, in the Philippines. So I was in middle school at the time. And yeah, it was an interesting childhood. We spent anywhere from 2 to 4 years in any given country. So I saw 7 countries before I came here to go to college. Saw a bunch of parts of the world that I wouldn't have a chance to see otherwise. Got to interact with people from a broad range of backgrounds and cultures. So uh, it was unconventional to say the least. But then since then I've spent most of my adult life on the west coast of the United States. I went to school at Stanford in the Bay Area. Started my career at Microsoft as a software engineer, and led engineering teams there for about 8 years. But always wanted to do something my own, and kind of had the startup bug, I think, from a pretty early part of my career. Finally made that move in 2011. Came down to LA, started a fashion technology business with a former coworker and another co-founder. Ran that business for 3 years, scaled it up, raised some venture capital, ended up selling to another LA area e-commerce business. Then spent a little bit of time looking to see what I want to do next. Uh, Met my co-founders at Thrive in the summer of 2014. Was just blown away by everything that had already been accomplished around that business. So jumped on board, and almost a decade later at this point, the rest is history. Um,
So with all the countries that you've traveled to,
yeah,
um, what has it taught you about just people in general? I guess I guess let me preface it by saying this. So one thing that Josie and I, my wife, co-founder, we've kind of established by just traveling, not living in different areas, but just traveling like on vacations for long stints of time. What we've kind of come to the conclusion is no matter where you end up on the socioeconomic ladder, no matter what language you speak, we all kind of want to just be loved, accepted, and in peace. Um, so, what I guess based on your experience, obviously you've lived in these areas, and I'm sure you've spoken many different languages or understood many different languages. What general gist or feel have you gotten from people from all walks of life in different parts of the world?
yeah. And obviously, no easy answer to this, but a few things I'll say are, I mean, I think it's a reinforcing fact that people are fundamentally good. So I think, wherever you go on Earth, whether it's kind of more affluent communities or somewhere in the middle of nowhere, um, my interactions with people have largely been positive. Maybe been fortunate in that regard. So I think at its core, humanity is cooperative. People do want to see the best for each other, and do good by their fellow person. And the flip side of it is, I think happiness is definitely not tied to wealth. I've been fortunate to live in some really nice areas, and some areas that are definitely more impoverished. And I think it's really kind of once you can kind of set the expectations for yourself wherever you want, and kind of your sense of happiness or success or kind of well-being really happens to be where you stand compared to your expectations. And in many cases, like, it boils down to the quality of the relationships you have, the kind of community you have surrounding yourself. So those are a few things that have sort of seemed to hold true, kind of regardless of where I go. To your point, it's not just living somewhere; even you can kind of feel it in communities, even when you go as a tourist and more of an outsider in these areas. But it's definitely hardening.
Did your mom instill the, because I know you mentioned the entrepreneurial bug, was that instilled early or was that something that you kind of developed later in life?
I think it was something that I went to college with the goal of running a software company. And at the time, Stanford, I remember, did not have a business degree, so I studied computer science and economics. Uh, I think my mom worked a single career her whole life. She was a career civil servant. She joined the civil service in her early 20s, was an ambassador for the last 20 years of her career, but basically worked one job from start to finish, which was certainly much more typical of her generation than ours. And it was a fairly predictable career too. It was in government service, so she worked really hard, but she was not subject to kind of the same level of kind of risk, ambiguity, utterly unforeseen circumstances that you would be as an entrepreneur. So I think some of that I probably grew on my own. But I think what she instilled in me was a work ethic, and back in the late '60s when you write an exam in India to sign up for the civil service. So it's a countrywide exam, 100,000 people take it, and I think the top like 10 or 20 people joined the foreign service. And she, I think, was the first woman to come in first in that exam. And, she came out of a really small town and didn't have access to, kind of expensive tutors and things of the sort, but she just outworked everybody else. So, and she certainly pushed me in that regard when I was still kind of out of school age, but I think a lot of it stuck. And I think the grit and the perseverance that you need as an entrepreneur, a lot of that does come from just being able to put in the hours and really kind of grind it out. So I think that part I will certainly credit her with fully.
Well, speaking of student and school,
Yeah.
what kind of student were you?
I was a pretty good student. Certainly once you kind of went from pass fail to letter grades. I remember it was like a little bit more lackadaisical kind of in elementary school and middle school, but then by the time there was a competitive element to it, I was pretty determined to not sort of fall off top tier. I was also a pretty sheltered kid, so I didn't have as many distractions to keep me from studying. So I always did pretty well in school, and like sort of did well in standardized tests and all that stuff. So that stuff came fairly naturally, I think, to me.
And then growing up outside of being very studious and grinding it out in school, did you have any particular hobbies? Were you interested in sports or anything like that?
I played a lot of sports casually. I played soccer, played volleyball, played whatever it was that they would offer at school. I was like never the largest kid or the most athletic, so I don't think the establishment was well motivated to invest overly in my athletic future. Beyond that, I mean, I love to travel even as a kid beyond where, like, one of the advantages of being in all these places is we got to go explore neighboring countries, neighboring areas a lot. So that I really enjoyed. I took up photography early in life, so that's always been more so back then when I had a lot more time, but a real passion. So yeah, those are a few of the things outside just working.
So, are those things that you were passionate back then? Are you still passionate about now, like photography?
I am. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I had sort of the time and will to dedicate the hours to it that I used to be able to before, or be as singular in that focus. But yeah, I still have a kind of a deep artistic appreciation for it, and like our walls are covered in pictures that I've taken from places we've been to, and like it brings me a lot of joy. So
And I know that most of your career right now is focusing on like the technical aspects of Thrive. So how do you get the creative self out? How do you get the creative outlet? Or how do you express yourself creatively?
the interesting thing about, I mean, technology work is very creative work. So my role is connecting business strategy, consumer experience and technology strategy together. So that's not necessarily as operational as you would imagine it is. A lot of it's, really kind of teasing apart what's going on in our customers' heads. How do we better serve them? What are the opportunities out there in terms of technologies we can build or buy to meet their needs? How do we evolve our customer experience and iterate and learn from data and try out solutions that no one else has tried? So I think if you talk to most software engineers, there's a huge creative aspect to what they're doing because you're building from scratch. So I find, solving these problems is actually the fun part of the job, right? And particularly being able to do that in a consumer-facing business where, you put a solution into market and you get data and feedback, positive or negative right away, which then informs your thinking and allows you to iterate. So I'd say I'm fortunate enough to be in a role where, there is a lot of operational rigor under the hood, but a lot of the highest level challenges of what I do are quite creative. Um, and our team builds a visual experience as part of what we do. So the kind of user experience and UI design teams report up to me. And while I'm certainly not a designer, the team gets plenty of my input in terms of what things should look and feel like as well.
What are your personal core values? Because I know that Thrive has its own set of
Yeah.
values, but just you, Sasha, personally, what are your personal core values?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever sort of sat down and considered that question in depth. I mean, a few things I'll say are, particularly as you grow older, like and spend more time around a lot more people, like the few things I want to hold on to are I never want to compromise my ethics or my standards. And again, as a in business, you're confronted with so many situations where there's sort of no easy answer to a problem, but being able to fall back on doing the right thing, and whether that's doing right by your customers, doing right by people, and being able to make decisions and then kind of go home and not lose any sleep over it at night is very rewarding in of itself, and I think creates an environment that is sustainable. Beyond that, I think recognize that most of us don't know a whole lot about most things, and we should continue to keep learning and expanding our scope of knowledge and really being willing and eager to listen to other perspectives. Again, one of the big benefits of continuing to run a business is we're surrounded by people that have real dedicated expertise in areas that we as founders may know very little about or have just intuition around, and being able to learn from those folks is one of the most valuable parts of what I do. And that extends out of the workplace. It's just be always being intellectually curious and excited to pick up kind of new skills, new knowledge. That's something that's very important to me, and I would hate to put myself in a position where I ever felt I was sort of stagnating or done. I think that would be a good motivation to go change things up a bit.
I guess let's fast forward a little bit to the inception of Thrive. What was that initial conversation with your co-founder about Thrive, or the concept of a online competitor to all the big box stores, but obviously everything is just going to be better for you, and have this amazing mission behind it? So what was like the initial conversation like?
Yeah, so I met Nick, my co-founder, still our CEO at was a coffee shop in Venice back in 2014. I'd been introduced to him through a mutual friend that ran a startup accelerator out of Santa Monica. Um, and truth be told, the picture of the business was not quite as obvious, 9 years ago as it is today. And certainly to someone like me who did not have a kind of career long background in natural products or grocery or any of those areas. So it wasn't apparent at the time that um, there was a real divide in terms of access to healthier options. Like that's for someone who if you grew up with reasonable financial means and lived in kind of major cities on the West Coast, usually had access to pretty high quality groceries, and kind of health and wellness was always something that was personally important to me. So I never sort of lived on fast food or anything else that a lot of people in this country have to. So I think the magnitude of the problem, the kind of alarming rate at which lifestyle diseases have kind of taken over the last 50 to 70 years. The price premium that one has to pay for natural and organic, the geographic barriers to access once one leaves kind of major metropolitan areas or and goes into areas that are true food deserts. There's just not a ton of information floating around about this stuff, particularly 10 years ago. So for me, it was a real education in terms of the scale of the problem that the company was trying to solve, the criticality of solving that problem, because kind of health and nutrition is something that's so fundamental that if you kind of look at your pyramid of needs, they're right at the bottom around survival, like just above survival, I'm guessing. So it was a kind of a critical problem, one that needed to be solved at scale, and those were just those are much more things that we take for granted today. Given kind of fast forwarding 9 years through everything from major media outlets to health and wellness influencers to what have you. This has become much more of a mainstream trend, and it was much less so a decade ago. So for me, it was an education in the concept. But what motivated me to come on board was really the caliber of the folks who were already involved. Again, understanding the scale of this problem and seeing the traction and the excitement that was already there behind this movement. It sort of became a no-brainer, or that's something that I should and could contribute my skills to.
Who has significantly, it doesn't have to be significantly, but who has influenced you and your approach in business and in leadership? Do you have any mentors that have helped guide you along the way, whether that was professors or just people who you've met along the way, other entrepreneurs or CTOs or CEOs?
Yeah, there's no one I can point to that I've gotten direct kind of day to day or one to one mentorship from. So, I think what's guided me and guided us, to some extent in the business as well, is just looking at touchstone companies that we admire and understanding, kind of digging in and understanding the why, understanding the philosophies behind how those businesses are run. So if you kind of look at people who have found success and look at the things that are sort of common between them, one hopes will come away with some great ideas. A few that have been really impactful, few businesses and leaders that have been really impactful for me are, Bezos and Amazon is one that comes to mind for anyone who is in commerce. Not just because like if you're not paying attention to Amazon as a retail business, you're probably going to be in trouble in the long term. But they had an enviable focus on the long term, which again, when you're in the early stages of a business and just sort of hoping to ward off existential risk, the ability to look forward 5, 10, 25 years and maintain a focus on that North Star is critical, but at the same time, not necessarily easy. Also a business where, even in their values, it's codified that you go deep, you be rigorous, you get into the data, you look at things deeply and make really thoughtful decisions. And an absolute obsession with the needs of the customer, all of which you sort of almost take for granted as being the right things to do. But there's very few companies out there that can, say that they've codified it and really kind of lived by those values, through thick and thin for, now in their case, 30 some years. Whole Foods is another one that was very kind of influential for us in the journey through Thrive, because in some ways that's sort of the on Amazon. It's rather than having a singular focus on one stakeholder at the exception of all others. One of the books we read was Counselor's Capitalism, which really speaks this idea of a stakeholder-driven approach in business and leadership, where you're looking for this sort of like win-win-win-win-win solutions. So really getting creative and not accepting zero sum as an acceptable way to do business, and making sure you're taking care of all your constituents, your customers, your investors, your employees, your shareholders, the environment. So so those have been a few of the businesses that, certainly over the last decade or so of my career have been kind of really influential to watch. And again, it's sort of the philosophies behind how they're run. It's not necessarily the mechanics of the business. They didn't teach me anything about kind of the finer points of management or anything like that. But those remain touchstone to me to this day.
So I don't know if you've met Jeff Bezos, but if you've had the opportunity to do so, and you've had just one question that you would ask him, what would be that question?
Interesting one. I would ask him sort of, whether he genuinely felt that certainty, when he was sitting there in 1994 about the long term prospects of the business. Like, what were his fears? What were the hard decisions he was confronted with? What were the trade offs that he was sort of forced to make? Because that stuff just never comes up in the public conversation. It's usually this sort of like very straight and narrow path with relatively few side turns, as some of the greatest kind of enterprises on earth get to scale. But I'd be curious for what those dark times were like in the early days, and when was his confidence ever shaken, and how he navigated his way through it.
So I would actually want to ask you that question. So early on, what were those moments that you thought we may have to shut our doors, or a lot of fear kind of took over, and how were you able to navigate these valleys in your business career and kind of turn them into peaks?
I mean, there are a couple that come to mind in the early days of Thrive in particular. So one is, pre-launch at the business, we had a really hard time raising money, and CPG, particularly trying to do what we're trying to do. It is a capital intensive business, so this was not something that we could have. We would not have been able to launch or scale the business without a meaningful amount of capital. And the challenge came because we took a traditional fundraising approach. We approached every venture capitalist we knew, and pitched the idea. And at the time, as I mentioned earlier, it was not obvious to the venture community. Certainly, this was a problem that needed solving, and you can kind of imagine why. These are kind of entirely affluent, mostly male, non-grocery shoppers who live in New York or San Francisco, that have ample access to healthy alternatives, and can't imagine a world where anyone needed to compete with Whole Foods. So we struck out. We talked to 50 plus VCs. No one was willing to write a check. And then it forced us to innovate and kind of figure out, I don't think we would ever accept the notion that we would ever shutter our doors. So we ended up talking to, and this ended up being one of the best things for the business, talking to health and wellness influencers, who we'd already been kind of networking with as potential marketing partners to the business, and asked them if they wanted to invest. And kind of contrary to the VCs, for the bloggers and the health influencers, they already knew this problem existed, because they had audiences of in some cases hundreds of thousands or millions of people that made it very clear to them that they did not have the access they wanted. They knew there was an information gap. They knew there was it was of critical importance to get this class of natural organic products to people. So we had a lot more success there. And while it was sort of really kind of a little bit here, a little bit there, we built a coalition of I would say like dozens, potentially hundreds of folks even before we launched, who invested varying amounts in the business. Also, that kind of put them on the same side of the table as us when it came to marketing promotions. So they committed to help support the business through promotion at launch. That allowed us to get out the door. Certainly didn't. Yeah, it funded the business. It sort of warded off that existential risk. But more importantly, meant that when we launched, we had the support of this amazing coalition of folks with their audiences that were primed for our message. We didn't have to spend a dime on paid media the first year in market, and that allowed us to get to scale and prove out the concept to to then, kind of get more traditional sources of funding once the data and the business growth supported it. So like that was one kind of, it was definitely a tough spot to be in. But it's one of those things where necessity is the mother of invention, and we were fortunately able to navigate it. Um, the other one, which is an unknown, is, we didn't really know if people were willing to pay for this membership. We knew there's membership models out there, kind of Costco and Amazon Prime and a bunch of others had done this, but they're known household brands. Is anyone going to come spend $60 to be a member of Thrive Market? And that was one where I sort of, I didn't know the answer to that. Pre-launch, we were just kind of betting on it, but the first validation we got was, we did friends and family and so on for a month or so when we launched the business, and that went fine. But I remember I was visiting some friends in Seattle, and we had our first bit of kind of mainstream consumer press on Refinery 29. And I'm sitting there watching the traffic charts, and kind of the Google Analytics real time thing spiked up. And I'm like, okay, so people are actually at least paying attention. And then, the membership started rolling in and the orders started coming in. And this was, a relatively mainstream audience. So like that was a big aha moment for us where we could say, okay, like we've got not quite product market fit yet, but there's evidence that people are interested, right? And that like people aren't going to, completely reject this concept out of hand. So, those are a couple of big sighs of relief that we breathed in the early days of the business.
That's great. I love those stories, and we too have plenty of stories
Yeah.
of almost shutting our doors, and then just whether it's a new product or a new service that we kind of released, kind of makes us bounce back. PVH never, we never took any venture capital money or anything like that, so it was always bootstrapped. You could still see like my smug face on Kickstarter asking people for money.
Yeah.
That's still on there. So, but you don't have to search it. Please don't. It was in my old gym, which I then sold after we launched the Kickstarter. I sold the gym to focus on PBH full time, because that's the money that we were kind of living off of, and we were essentially two broke college kids with Josie's mom's oven for a very long time. Because when we launched the Kickstarter, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when we launched the Kickstarter, we only had enough for the plumbing.
Oh,
So we
wow.
didn't have we didn't have an oven, we didn't have any tables, mixers, nothing like that. And it was just Josie and I for the first, I think for the first like 6 years, it was just Josie and I, kind of just slinging cookies and brownies, until we kind of expanded our product line. We started adding subscription models, and that's kind of where we took off. And then eventually we kind of dove into co-manufacturing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what kind of separates, I guess, and I lightly say this, but what separates good founders from great founders is kind of like the motivation to keep going. And every time you get knocked down, you can kind of get back up. What motivates you to continue driving that mission for Thrive Market?
Sure. So few things. And one is we're still we got a mission that's big enough that it can last a lifetime, and hopefully we can build a company that also lasts a lifetime to do it. We've got 1.3 billion members, which again every time I say it, kind of blows my mind. It's a lot of people, but at the same time, it's only about 1% of the households in the country. So when it comes to solving the problem of food inequality or creating better health outcomes for people at scale, we're still in the very, very early innings of what can be done. So, as long as the business continues to grow and we continue to be able to make progress towards that mission, that's one big motivator, is being able to continue to have that impact and be in the thick of it while that impact is happening. The second is, kind of references the early days, like I'm continuing to learn as a consequence of my role here. And part of that is every time the business scales, you solve one set of problems and you encounter a new set that are, usually harder and more complex. So the bar goes up kind of with every year and every echelon of scale or success or whatever you might say. But the really nice thing about that is, as you continue to scale, you also get to surround yourself with even more amazing people in the company. So, with every employee and certainly every new senior leader that's come in, I'm always blown away by the level of expertise of seeing someone who is absolutely best in class in their respective area operating. And as you mentioned, like, the early days, like you kind of do all of it. It's like two folks in a kitchen, or like, 10 of us in a warehouse or whatever it might be, and you kind of scrap it through, and you do what you got to do to keep things going and move forward on behalf of the company and your customers. But there's a huge kind of step function change when the pros really start to come in. So that's been really exciting to see. And as our business gets more complex, and as our leadership team seasons, and as kind of new folks come on board, I love to take that opportunity to kind of pick their brains and hopefully expand my knowledge, and that keeps it new and fresh and exciting as well. So those are a few of the things that kind of keep me going day to day.
Nice. So my next question is lengthy, so I had to write it down. So I'm just gonna kind of just read it off my notes. So Thrive Market has a unique model of providing memberships to low-income families for every paid membership. How do you measure the social impact of your company, and what kind of changes have you witnessed in the lives of those who you've gained access to healthier products?
Yeah, it's a great question. So on the measurement side, we're a pretty data driven organization, so we're tracking every free membership that we're giving away to kind of low income, first responder, student, teacher, veteran. So we can track the utilization. We track our progress on our access commitment around raising dollars to fight food insecurity. So, our commitment is to raise $20 million by 2030. I think we're about a little over 60% of the way there already. So we're tracking those metrics, and then on the more qualitative side, we're also tracking. We get case studies from Gives members on a really regular basis through our mission team, so we can really see kind of qualitative verbatims on the impact that we're having there. We would love to get to the point where we've got the scale and resources to really start to quantitatively track health outcomes. I think that would be our North Star, is to say, okay, we've invested in this community. Now we've actually changed people's health profiles there. We're not quite there yet. But along the way, I mean, you get these incredible stories of how people's lives have evolved by being able to kind of turn a switch and now have access to the kinds of products that they needed for their diet, or having ingredient sensitivities and not having, geographic access, or having mobility issues and not be able to get to the grocery store, and any of these things where we can be of service. If anything, even if it's sort of a low end where we're getting, only kind of a sampling of what's going on, like that level of detail in the video testimonials and so on that we get back is just so powerful, and what keeps us kind of engaged and motivated around continuing to push the mission.
So Thrive offers a unique membership where when they pay the one-time $60 fee, um, it grants them these amazing discounts to premium products. So how does Thrive manage to beat out grocery chains and the big box stores? How do you guys manage to beat out most people in price? Um, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so we have our operating model is fundamentally different than a brick and mortar grocery store. So, to start off, we have a curated catalog. So we carry a little over 5,000 products in our assortment today versus, you know, 30,000 plus at least if you went to a regular grocery store, often 100,000 plus if you go to a big box store like a kind of a Walmart or Target or something. So, with that curation comes purchasing power. So we're able to buy narrow and deep. So, we kind of punch above our weight class when it comes to our ability to work with our brand partners to ensure that we have the best and sharpest pricing for our members through that curation. On the back end, we warehouse products centrally. Our fulfillment is direct to consumer, so we operate, a little over 1 million square feet of warehouse space across 3 distribution centers that covers the entire country. So our distribution model is different than a traditional grocery store that has much more distributed brick and mortar footprint, a lot more just in time replenishment. And that model allows us to kind of squeeze a lot of operational efficiency out of the singular task of getting this class of products to as many homes as possible. So, we pass on that operational efficiency in terms of additional savings to our members. And then there is the membership fee. So the membership fee lets us, collect a modest sum of money that our members can afford, but we collect it up front. That allows us to improve kind of our operating cash flow as a business, and then kind of reinvest those proceeds into member experience up front in a way that a business that is only making money off kind of margin from product sales wouldn't be able to. So we don't need to maintain the same margin profile on every order because we have the membership to backstop our profitability and sustainability as a business. So those are a few of the areas. There's a lot more to it. We have our own private label that we manufacture, which allows us to kind of do all this to the next level where we can increase the quality standards, provide more value to our members, and improve our cost structure by removing middlemen and intermediaries on all the products that we make ourselves. So yeah, long answer, and I'm sure there's others at the company that can give you even more details under the hood on that one. But that's a little bit of what we do.
That's great. You've mentioned that Thrive Market emphasizes on sustainability and is very environmentally conscious. Could you elaborate on the efforts to support environmentally friendly practices within the products that you offer, or like within the operations of the company?
Yeah, so there's a handful of standards and commitments that we've made in this area, and this has been really important to us since day one. But it's one of those areas where, as I mentioned, it's been just amazing to have dedicated experts on our team that are working towards this. So, one commitment is we're committed to being carbon neutral or carbon negative by 2025. And we're doing this, we bought carbon offsets from day one. We've had continuous improvement efforts to reduce our carbon footprint from day one. But now that involves kind of moving from gas to electric in RFCs and in many of the areas, investing in solar when available. As of 2023, we were already climate neutral certified, and continue to work on improvements in that area. Second major area, we committed to being zero waste in our fulfillment centers. We achieved that across our entire network in 2022. And this is one of those areas where it really is a win-win. So it's, a win for our customers because they want to support a business that obviously has sustainable practices. It's a win for the environment. It's also a win for the business because those are actually cash flow positive investments for us now, investing in cardboard baling and a lot of the other kind of capital expenses that let us achieve those certifications. Aiming to be plastic neutral as of 2023. And again, this is a combination of plastic reduction in our supply chain, and offsets that we're buying for any plastic that is used necessarily in fulfillment. Deep investment in our merchandising side and moving beyond organic and moving towards regenerative products and sourcing, which means that when we source a regenerative product into the Thrive Market catalog, kind of every unit produced and every unit sold actually leads to increased reforestation and kind of positive climate change. So the more of our catalog that can be regenerative, the more sustainable and closer to kind of carbon negative and our business becomes. And last but not least, this stuff's baked into our charter now. So we've been B Corp certified since 2020, and now as of 2023, we've reincorporated as a public benefit corporation, which is, for those who don't know, like a much more rigorous standard around stakeholder-based operations that is now baked into the very operating structure of our business. So, those are all kind of key investments we're making to ensure that our commitment to sustainability and the mission kind of remains a core focus area for the future of the business.
I'm sure you've probably had conversations similar to what I'm about to ask with other companies, but has Thrive used its influence, especially like in the sustainability and environmental space, to help influence other companies to kind of follow suit? Like, for example, your partners or the people who you're sourcing products from, like other brands?
100%. I mean, this is part of the day-to-day conversations that, particularly our merchandising team is going to be having with their vendors all the time. Their vendors, their co-manufacturers, we're constantly looking for ways to kind of collaboratively raise the standards in the industry, whether it's on ethical sourcing or packaging design or any of the other areas involved in our supply chain. A lot of the efforts that we've done around zero waste, are also, effectively open source so that they're available to other companies to use the blueprint, use the tactics and strategies that we've put into effect in their own areas. Our goal is to, really prove out that, like one of the legacies we want to have is that you really can build a social enterprise in a sustainable, scalable way. So it's not kind of profit or planet. It is both. So, which isn't necessarily easy for people to like. We've learned a lot of this through trial and error and deep investment. But we want everything that we're doing here to be freely available for other businesses to emulate or improve upon.
So we're gonna go take a pivot to the personal side again. Um, you are part of the new dad club, like me,
Yeah.
and I always look to other fathers for help because I know that you have a little bit more experience than I do. And
2 months
how
worth.
do you
So I don't
manage?
know how far ahead I
Yeah,
was.
well, 2 months in infant time is light years.
Yeah.
Um, so what? Just me as a new dad, what how do you balance managing Thrive, which I'm sure takes a lot of your time, as well as being an incredible husband and being a present father, and then on top of that, basically helping yourself, nurturing yourself and your well-being?
Yeah, it's an important question, and I mean the first thing I'll say is when it comes to myself, I think everyone's like what kind of gives you energy and what gives me energy may be totally different things. I think if it doesn't come through in this conversation, I like to work and like I enjoy the professional challenges, and I enjoy putting the hours in. So I don't tend to find kind of time on the job draining or something that I need like time to recover from. So it's a good thing for me as an entrepreneur. It's maybe not so great for me in terms of kind of maintaining what most would consider to be like a balanced existence. That said, like as you mentioned, I think like certainly becoming a parent, there's non-negotiable changes in your day to day that are important. I mean, a few things that sort of I'll just kind of throw off the top of my head that have worked for me the past about a year at this point would be one, and this is easier said than done, like prioritize sleep. So, if you kind of think about the fundamentals of what we all need to kind of feel good and operate well, like if we're chronically sleep deprived, like everything else sort of falls apart from there. So I think I've done a reasonable job of that, and we're fortunate to have support, and I've got a very kind of understanding partner. So like I try to make sure that like I go to bed when I need to go to bed. I get up rested, so that sort of sets the foundation for my day. I think the rest of it's really about being organized and intentional in a way that I did not have to be a year ago. So maintaining those family rituals, like there's a bedtime routine every night from like 6 to 6:45. I'm gonna be there and I'm gonna be present and I'm gonna like struggle mightily to put aside the distractions of the workday, but I'm gonna do it and I'll get better at it over time. Um, we're fortunate enough to have kind of a remote first working environment, so I am at home, which I think makes my wife also works from home for remote business. So we're both fortunate enough to be 20 feet away from our kids versus having to deal with kind of a commute and kind of a physical separation. So on one hand, like your work life and your personal life start to blur in sort of uncomfortable ways in that environment, but at the same time, practically speaking, like The logistics are, it's incomparable in terms of being able to spend a lot of time, being a family, even when you're attending to your work duties. And then beyond that, I think it's, I've gotten maybe too good at forgiving myself for not getting the balance quite right, and recognizing that it's a bit of a journey, and making sure that I'm remaining open, particularly to feedback from my partner and anything else when I need to be kind of more present and attentive, and not dismissing that, and not being defensive about it. So, just sort of muddling my way through it. And then, last but not least, I think we just have to stay more organized. I think you can get a lot done in kind of a regular 8 hour workday or something like that, if every hour is really being put to its highest purpose. And kind of where I sit, what that means is making sure that I'm investing in amazing people who can, who've earned my trust, who I can really invest ownership and autonomy into. So I don't need to be in every conversation. I don't need to be checking everything. I think without that, it would be a lot harder, because the business and life is a lot more complex now than it was 9 years ago. So
I like that the two things that you mentioned, rituals and being organized. So one thing, I admittedly am very poorly organized. I'm not organized at all, and I'm working on it every single day. And then rituals. So one of the things that I have is with my little guy is I have to be there for bath time, bedtime, and when he wakes up. So whenever he's being bathed, I want to be around. Whether I'm helping out, just helping my wife, passing the soap or something. I'm the one that puts him to bed every single night, non-negotiable. And I'm the one that wakes him up in the morning, again, non-negotiable. I want to be the one that, he spends most of his time with his mother all day. And I want to be the one that, he understands, and, obviously he doesn't, but I guess it makes me feel good inside, I guess, knowing that he knows that dad's going to put him to sleep every single night, and he's going to be there when he first wakes up in the morning. So
yeah,
I would
that's
say
that's
those are
huge.
that would be like my ritual in the morning. But on the topic of rituals, I've I've somehow become possessed and wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning,
I
and
can't imagine why.
yeah, yeah. Well, 3:40 is my
Yeah,
son waking me up, and then I
yeah,
just decide, well, you know what? I'm awake, so I'll just stay awake, and I'll start the day. I have varying. I've been trying different things on my morning routine, but I'm curious to know if you have one and what that looks like.
I'd say it's evolved a little bit um, over the years. Historically it was like fairly traditional. Like, drink a cup of coffee. I try to exercise in the morning, and then sort of scan my calendar, just sort of mentally prepare, prioritize for the day before the day starts, um, which which really kind of resolves into what are, a very short list. Like, what are like one or two things that I really need to get done, and if I get done, I can call the day a success, and sort of trying to predetermine that, because what I've noticed is, like, 9 a.m. or whenever your kind of corporate workday hits, it's like it's just sort of chaos after that, and like you kind of have very little control over the way things go in many cases. So going in with a plan as to what you're, like, being more intentional of what you want to get done, I think has been effective. Yeah, in recent, like, it's been a little more hit or miss in that regard with the little ones. So, these days, like, early morning is sort of unstructured family time for the most part, and then, if I can get the workout in, great. I still try to kind of have a kind of a moment of calm and silence before I start to approach the work task, which I felt's been a nice grounding exercise. But that's about it. There's no more. I've never been one for like a super kind of elaborate routine of any sort.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you obviously see a lot of different brands at Thrive. So if someone were to take a peek into your cabinets, what brands would they see?
I think that mostly see Thrive Market brand, and I don't say that simply because I work there. It just happens to be I buy a lot of staples and snacks, and I think the kind of our own brand in that area is absolutely world class. So I think it may have been a bit different, if I looked at it 5 or 6 years ago. But since then, I mean, the team's done such remarkable work that I was kind of looking back through my order history before this call. It's like all the snacks now are like Thrive Market branded, like all the oils, the condiments, like everything else is the spices. It's like, I'm sort of a walking poster child for the brand. There are a lot of kind of innovative new brands that I like to try out when I get a chance. So one of them we've been consuming a lot is this brand called Quantum that does sort of a caffeinated meal replacement bar. Um, so that's one that's we've got a few cases always sitting around, and it's sort of a little bit of a mid morning hit of energy when things are falling a little behind. So that's one. Um, Primal Kitchen historically used to be another favorite. Like all the mayos and the condiments and the dressings were key, particularly when I was kind of going through like doing more kind of ketogenic dieting, which I don't do anymore. But back then that stuff was really killer. Yeah. Beyond that, it varies a little bit from one day to the next. But most of my staples are stuff we make, which is part of the fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are there any specific skills or qualities that you've had to cultivate to be the CTO of Thrive Market?
Uh, it's changed again so much from when I started to where I sit now. Until the first couple of years of the business, was essentially a software engineer. We were all deep in the product. I was writing code all day. Now my role is much more focused on strategy and people and process. So, had some background doing that in my past lives. So I had a good foundation, but really, I had to really develop the ability to think longer term. Which again, like, isn't something you're always doing when you're in the very early stages of business, just sort of fighting for survival. And then the biggest skill is, okay, I was always pretty good at the doing. Now, how do I get to the point where I'm equally good at, leading, inspiring, coaching, educating, the entire people and process side of it? And that's, something that you kind of learn at least I learned mostly on the job. But, have definitely, I think that's an area where, I've definitely leveraged, informally, at least mentors, coaches, coworkers, like, everyone that I can talk to about how to get better at that I have. So I think that's been the biggest skill. I think as your organization starts to get larger, you know, how do you keep people aligned to, your mission, your values, your objectives? How do you provide them the right context so that they can make great decisions on their own without you having to be there? And yeah, won't say we're close to perfect on any of those, but that's something I focus on every day.
So, when you reflect on your time at Thrive Market, what kind of legacy or impact do you want to leave behind in terms of like the company's contribution to a healthier living and sustainability?
Yeah, I mean the first one, as I mentioned, we're still in the really early days in terms of just the scale of our impact. So, I would hope to be able to get the business to the point where, we're going from, million some households to tens of millions or hundreds of millions of households. Being a household brand, being able to, be, even if it's a small part of, of the lives of every household in this country and potentially beyond this country. So I think that's one is how, can we really say that we had that impact at scale? Second is what I mentioned around sustainability. Can we create a blueprint for successful social enterprise at scale? Can we prove out that it's not profits or the planet or sort of shareholders or employees or any of those? Can we build a business that creates sustainable value for a broad range of groups? I think last but not least. as I kind of reflect internally on our company, my department, other departments, can we say without the shadow of a doubt that we are a best in class organization, that we should all be proud to work for, that would be an employer of choice wherever we went, and really kind of is a touchstone from a business perspective of how to run an enterprise.
What do you want your little one to be most proud of?
That's a tough one. I'd say, um, I'd want her to say that her dad built something that did good in the world, and left the world a better place than he found it.
Sasha, if people want to learn more about you or Thrive Market, where should they go?
uh, thrivemarket.com to learn more about the company. Anyone else, feel free to find me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email, Sasha at thrivemarket.com. Love ideas, suggestions. We're always an open book with folks. So,
Sasha, I appreciate the conversation, my friend. This
Brian,
was
thank you very much.
enlightening. I loved it, and I wish you many more decades of success.
Sounds good. Same to you. Thank you for having me on. It's great to see you
Thank
again.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise.